Okay, sorry about that long wait. We are now working on the distributive property. So we did our two-step equations, with fractions and decimals, and now we're looking at more complicated stuff. And so we've got two different types of complicated things. That's our distributive property, and that's when we start having parentheses in there. Got to get rid of those parentheses before you can really start doing much to the equation. And the second thing is combining like terms, which will be a different video. So distributive property is really just a fancy form of that multiplication. So if you watched the integer video and we talked about multiplication being groups of something, then what happens is that number in front of the parentheses, like here, this 3, indicates that I have 3 groups of x minus 4. And so when I have 3 groups of x minus 4, what I can really look at it is I've got 3 x's, but I also have 3 of the minus 4's. So if I have 3 groups of minus 4, I end up with really a minus 12. So we use that to simplify, and then we're back to our two-step equation. And again, always looking for addition or subtraction first on the same side of our variable. Since I have a minus 12, I add 12 to both sides. So the minus 12 and plus 12 becomes 0, always double checking that. Then I have 3x equals 60, and that's 3 times x, so to undo times I divide. And I end up with x equals 20. And that's our solution. And so I'm always what we call distributing or multiplying inside the parentheses by that number on the outside. So on our next one, I have negative 2 that I'm going to distribute inside to the 3 and to the minus d. And so this is really like a negative 1d. So when I'm multiplying, I'll be multiplying a negative 2 times negative 1. So let's go ahead and look at this. So negative 2 times 3 will give me negative 6. And then a negative 3 times, now this minus belongs to that d. So it's like a minus 1. So negative 2 times negative 1 gives me a positive 2d. And that's equal to 4. So again, I'm only multiplying inside these parentheses, not on the other side of my equation. That's why that little barrier line's there. So I'm going to increase that barrier line. Now I'm moving everything away from the d. Now this is kind of flipped around a little. We haven't seen this yet. That d is right here. So when I'm looking, that plus 2 right next to it is multiplication. So I'm not getting rid of that plus 2 first because it's right next to my d. I'm getting rid of this minus 6. So to undo the minus 6, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So this becomes 0. So now I have a positive 2d. Now again, leaving that one that's right next to it because that's indicating the multiplication if it's right next to it. So 4 plus 6 gives me 10. Now because this is a multiplication, 2 times d, I divide. So I divide by 2 on both sides. That cancels. And d is 10 divided by 2, which is really just 5. Okay, so for the next one, again, we're distributing inside the parentheses. Go ahead and draw my line. So inside here, 3 times m gives me 3 m's. 3 times 4, 3 groups of 4 gives me 12, equals 24. Now I'm looking for that variable right here, moving everything away from it, starting with that plus 12. So I'm going to minus 12 on both sides. So now I have 3m equals 12. That's 3 right next to m, so that's times. So to undo times, I divide. 3 divided by 3 is 1, giving me 1m, or m. 12 divided by 3 gives me 4. Okay, and then our last one, same idea. We've got negative 6 groups, or the opposite. So I'm going to multiply in. So I get a negative 6 times x, which is negative 6x. Then I'm going to multiply in right here, a negative 6 times a negative 1, because I can't forget that negative right there. So negative times negative gives me the positive. So positive 6, and that's equal to negative 48. I'm going to draw my line so I can make sure I'm doing everything even and right. I start with that plus 6. So to undo plus 6, I minus 6 on both sides. So that plus 6 and minus 6 here cancel out. So now I have a negative 6x equals a negative 48 minus 6, or negative 48 plus negative 6, depending on how you like to look at that. They're both negative, so I add those together, and that gives me negative 54. Okay, now this is a negative 6 times x. Because that they're side by side, it's times. So I divide, because the opposite of times is divide, so I divide by negative 6. So the 6 will cancel and the negative will cancel, giving me x. Now here, I've got two negatives, top and bottom, so they're going to cancel each other out to become positive. So I just have 54 divided by 6, which would give me a positive 9. And that's our distributive property. Thank you and have a good night.